Hi guys, I've got a really cool wine to share with you today. This is actually one of the rarest wines in Argentina. So I want to talk you through a little bit about Argentina as a wine region and why this wine is seriously cool. But before we get into it, how cool is the original wooden case? If you're ever seeing a wine for sale and it says OWC, it means original wooden case. And particularly when we're collecting wine, some of these wines are part of the 1%, so they are some of the best wines in the world, and that essentially means that not only are they incredible to enjoy as a wine, but it also means they are incredibly valuable. So they do fall under an area of investments called collectibles, and when we're looking at collectibles, we're always thinking about mint condition, and the original wooden case is part of that mint condition. So I just love it. I love the original wooden case. I love getting something that's from the vineyard that reflects exactly what the producers had in mind for the presentation, not only of the wine, but the entire experience when you get some of these incredible wines. So very, very cool original wooden case. I'm super excited to try this wine. It is the 2020 vintage. I think in the last 20 years, there's only been about 7 vintages. This one, as I said, is the 2020. I think we might actually be the only retailer in Australia that sells this vintage. So incredibly rare, but coming back, I want to talk you through Argentina as a wine region. So generally when we're thinking about Argentina, we think about Malbec, and it's actually a country that produces the most amount of Malbec. However, Malbec is actually a great variety that originated in Bordeaux, and it can sometimes be found in Bordeaux blends. So interestingly enough, coming back over to Argentina, it's also a region known for producing a lot of the same grape varieties and blending Malbec with those Bordeaux blend varieties. So this one is actually a blend of Malbec and Cab Franc. So generally in Bordeaux and a Bordeaux blend, you would have Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and sometimes Malbec, sometimes Carmener as well. So this one is a blend of Malbec and Cab Franc, which is pretty cool because it also comes from the region of Mendoza. So when we think about Argentina as a wine region, it's close to the equator, so it's hot, but generally most of the vineyard sites are actually at elevation. So when we step up in elevation and altitude, that becomes a cooling influence, which means we can actually make a wine even though it's a much hotter climate. And central Mendoza, so where this wine specifically is from, is actually known for producing really elegant styles and high quality styles, so premium styles of Malbec. And there's a few reasons for that. So when we're sort of looking at Argentina as a region, it's inland. Generally, when we think about a region that's inland, sometimes there are cooling influences off the coast. However, with Argentina, it's actually blocked by the Andes, and that also means that it's protected from rain. So a lot of Argentina as a region is mostly desert, and so vineyard sites actually have to tap into these little like oases of water in what is otherwise desert. And so one thing that's quite common, or certainly was quite common in Argentina, is actually using flood irrigation. So they would basically plow sort of big troughs in between the different vineyard sites, and then they would essentially bring up the water and flood it. So now they use sort of drip irrigation, which is a little bit more water conscious, but that was typically how they did it. The other thing that they do typically in Argentina, because it's so hot, is they use a pergola system for training their vines. So what that essentially means is they would train the vines so that the leaves sort of hang over and the berries hang underneath them. That is sometimes still used, but normally what they do is they use a trellis system, which basically is what a lot of vineyard sites use all around the world. And it's really just training the vine in a similar way. And so you'll have like sort of cleaner rows, and you'll then have the canopy that overhangs and protects the berries. So it's quite common. It's used in a number of different parts of the world, even in Australia as well. So that is how they kind of protect some of those berries from the heat, the harshness of the heat, because you also don't want those berries to hang too low to the ground, and that's because the ground and the soil can retain a lot of that heat, and so the berries being close to them make them even hotter. So we want to kind of elevate them above the ground, but we want to give them kind of like an umbrella with the canopy to kind of shade them so that they don't get sunburnt, which is why sometimes if you go out to the Hunter Valley, you'll see kind of like this like white looking stuff all over grapes, and that's actually sunscreen to protect them from getting sunburnt. I digress. So coming back to Argentina, typically when you're kind of at a lower elevation, so those wines that are lower elevation, they're going to have more full-bodied flavor. So thinking about other warmer climates like in Australia, where we don't have a cooling influence, you'll typically have grapes that ripen quite quickly. And when we have a shorter ripening period where essentially, or a warmer climate, the acid levels drop really quickly when the grape is ripening and sugar levels rise really quickly. So what that means is we get more of a full-bodied flavor. Typically we have higher alcohol because there's higher sugar content proportionally. And sometimes we can kind of step over from ripe flavor fruit into more cooked fruits like jamminess, which is quite typical if we look at, say, the Barossa Valley. There's quite a prominent sort of flavor profile that's that nice sort of jamminess that we would get in a warmer climate. But when we have a cooling influence, you can get a cooler, and longer ripening period. So Central Mendoza is known for more elegant styles. So it's at higher elevation, some of the highest elevated vineyard sites. It's around 900 to 1100 meters above sea level. So when we have that altitude, it becomes a cooling influence. And what that means is we can essentially lengthen that ripening period, which means acid levels drop more slowly, sugar levels rise more slowly. So we get a more cool climate style of wine. And generally as a flavor profile, it's leaner, not less complex, but it's leaner. So it doesn't have that jamminess. It's got more of that acidity, that crisp freshness, but because it's a longer ripening period, we can generally fully ripen that grape. So we still get a really nice fruit flavor profile, but we also have that balance with nice crisp acidity. So it's a nice leaner finish. So this wine comes from that Central Mendoza area, which is known for those high elevation, which becomes a cooling influence, and those longer ripening periods as a result. It is at the foothills of the Andes. So there's a couple of things that then work in parallel there. So we don't have as much water, which sometimes can be good for grapes because when we balance a little bit of water stress, it means that that grape actually stops to push its resources as it's ripening into the leaves and pushes the resources it does have into the grape, which can also mean that we get a really nice flavor profile. So if you think about a vine, it's not spreading its resources between growing more of the leaves, so the canopy, and trying to grow the berries. So it will kind of pick which one when we have a little bit of water stress. And generally it picks the berries, which is great because we get more flavor profile, more resources going to those berries. The other thing being at elevation, but also at the foothills of the Andes, generally altitude, as I mentioned, becomes a cooling influence. Even though it's at altitude, if it's at the foothills of the Andes are at even higher altitude, cool air comes down the mountain. So we've got cooling influence from elevation, but we've got additional cooling influence coming down the mountain, and that helps to lengthen that ripening period. So that's why we have a really interesting style of wine. So within the Central Mendoza area, the sub-region that this wine comes from is, let me just double check how to pronounce that, Luján de Cuyo. Luján de Cuyo. My Spanish is terrible. My pronunciation is terrible. I will also bring it up on the screen so that hopefully you know where I'm talking about. But yes, let's get on to the wine. So really cool wooden case. This is actually named after, and you can see it on the box down the front, a guy called Sebastiano and another guy called Nazareno, two guys from Italy that immigrated over to Mendoza, Argentina, and this wine is essentially named in their honor. So Tiano and Nareno, so the shortening of their name, and it was actually their grandson that wanted to really reflect Malbec and these beautiful wines and his ancestors that came over and had built or had cultivated these vines in 1908. So the grandson actually collaborated with the president of Champagne Salon and Delamot, which is the sister estate to Champagne Salon. And he's created a fantastic wine. So this wine is, as I said, one of the rarest in Argentina and actually one of the rarest in South America. So it's only made in exceptional years. So generally when we get to these really rare wines, the top sort of 1% of the wine world, they are generally only made in exceptional years. Ceylon is a perfect example of that. And same with, you know, a lot of other really top wines like Chateau de Chem, Dom Perignon. So they're just some examples. But this wine, I think there's only been about 7 vintages in the last sort of 20 odd years. This is the 2020 vintage. I think we're actually maybe the only retailer in Australia that's selling the 2020. So it is, yeah, just an exceptionally good wine and incredibly rare. So I will open it because I've been super excited to try this. So this wine, what else can I tell you about it? There's no more than 6,000 bottles made. Oh, how cool is the label? I think as well, like coming back to the original wooden case, it's just the whole experience. Like you can see why they're such exceptional wines. It's not just the wine itself, it's the entire experience, the caliber of the experience. It's just incredible. But yeah, it's such a beautiful label. Yeah, so Luján de Cuyo, Mendoza, pretty sure that's how to pronounce it, is where it comes from. But yeah, such an amazing wine. Very, very excited to try this. I will grab a bottle opener. So also, if you haven't opened a capsule before, we essentially take the little knife. We want to cut under the lip. Usually you'll go one side halfway and then the other side halfway, and then we'll make an incision down the top. This one is, yeah, not quite so sharp, but we got there in the end. Not bad. Probably could have done a bit of a better job cutting around it, but that's essentially how you cut a capsule. So I'm going to use a Coravin for this. I've actually got a vintage, timeless vintage needle on this one. So this is a younger wine, something that can age for probably 20 or so years. Oh, look at the colour. You can tell it's young. It's got such a purplish hue to it. That's always a sign that it's a younger wine. With the exception of Zinamavro, which is a Greek wine that's very similar to Nebbiolo, that actually has a brownish sort of hue even in its youth. But generally speaking, young wines always have a purplish hue. They tend to go brown as they age. Oh, the smell, wow. Ooh, interesting. So much fruit. Red fruit, black fruit. You can tell it's aged in oak because we're getting some oak that's coming through. Not just the smoke, a little bit of cedar, like a little bit of chocolate, coffee, like a toasty sort of note. Oh, wow. Wow. It is really incredible to smell. Young, you can tell that I'm swirling it a lot. I think this could do with a bit of a decant just to open it up more. It's almost like a tiny bit of like a candid sort of note. Makes me wonder if there was some whole bunch fermentation in this one. Definitely the crisp acidity. You can smell that. Plum, as I said, red fruit, black fruit. Oh, what a pleasure to smell. Look at that colour. So as I said, you can tell that it's young. It's got that nice purplish hue. As I roll it around the glass, you can kind of see what they call the legs or the tears. So how slow or how slow they drop or how prominent they are is a reflection of the sugar content or the alcohol content. Just from smelling it, I want to say closer to 14%. Let's taste it. Wow. Wow. It's not often that I'm left speechless, but geez. There's so much happening on the palate. Definitely young. Definitely young. I think could use a little bit of time to soften just a little bit. There's so much acidity, so much fruit. You're getting kind of everything on the palate. There's even like a little bit of earthiness. There's the smoke, there's the chocolate, there's the coffee, there's the fruit, there's the acidity. It's got really nice tannins. These ones, the fine tannins, but they also have like a little bit of a powderiness to them, a little bit of a grip. The grip is partly tannin, but there's also a lot of acidity. So generally they can change the mouthfeel. So if something is really acidic, it can feel more tannic, and vice versa. If something is really tannic, you can think that it's more acidic than it is. But beautiful. I think as well you've got the little bit of spice from the Malbec, but that also generally they age Malbec, which is very typical in this wine as well. They age it in French oak, which does give that spice. It gives a little bit of tannin. It also changes the flavor profile because we have that interaction with oxygen. So you've got the beautiful fruit that's coming from the Malbec, but you've got the spice as well that's coming from the French oak that it's aged in. You've got the Cab Franc that gives it a little bit of a softness, but I think that will come through even more as it ages because it's very acidic in a nice way. I keep saying that, but it's in a nice way that it's really fresh. You've got those tannins, all the components are there. They're, I would say, balanced, but could be better integrated, which this wine is, can age for 20 plus years. So it is on the early side. I think it's got definitely legs to go a lot longer, and that flavor profile will integrate and develop, and you can kind of get a sense of where that will be in a little bit more time. It's a very elegant expression of Malbec, very cool climate vibe. It's a wine you just keep wanting to go back to, and every time you're kind of getting more that's coming through. That's why I keep smelling it, I keep tasting it, because there's so many layers. There's a smell and a taste that's really sticking out to me, but I can't quite put my finger on it. That's why I said maybe whole bunch fermentation, because there's just a slight sort of candied smell and taste to it. I also want to say that maybe there's maybe a very slight herbaceous note. Very slight. Wow. Definitely I can see why this is, one of the most coveted wines in Argentina. Very stoked to have been able to try this. So excited to see how this ages. As you can tell from this video, I've kind of lost my words with how impressed I am and how taken aback I am. I love a Malbec. This is definitely cool climate reflection. A lot of the other Malbecs that I've had are more sort of that fuller flavor profile, hotter climate flavor profile. Wow, this is, incredible. Cheers.